When a desperate woman witnesses murder in Boston and flees west as a mail-order bride, she never expects to be rejected at the altar or for a lonely station master with a bitter teenage daughter to offer marriage within an hour of meeting her. What starts as a marriage of convenience becomes a deadly game when her past follows her to Wyoming, threatening not just her new family but their very lives. Will love be enough to overcome secrets, lies, and a corrupt detective who will stop at nothing to silence her forever? Like and subscribe for more epic Western romances that prove it's never too late for a second chance at love. When a murder witness becomes a mail-order bride, everything changes. Western romance drama. The gaslight flickered in the narrow Boston alley, casting dancing shadows that made Catherine Winters press herself deeper into the doorway. She'd only stepped out for air from the stuffy boarding house parlor, but what she witnessed in those next 30 seconds would change her life forever. Detective Morrison stood over Chief Bradley's crumpled form, wiping blood from a brass knuckle. "Should have minded your own business about the docks, old man." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the gasp that threatened to escape. She'd heard rumors about corruption in the police department, but seeing Morrison, the same detective who'd been investigating the missing funds from her employer's books, commit murder, made her blood run cold. Morrison straightened, adjusting his coat. "Make it look like a robbery," he told his companion, a thin man Catherine didn't recognize. "And find that bookkeeper woman." Bradley said she had copies of the ledgers. Catherine's heart stopped. They were talking about her. The ledgers she'd duplicated when she'd noticed discrepancies in the shipping company's accounts. The same ledgers she'd shown to Chief Bradley just yesterday. She waited until the men disappeared into the fog before emerging from her hiding place. Her hands shook as she hurried back to her room, threw her few belongings into a carpet bag, and retrieved the money she'd been saving. There was only one way to disappear completely from Boston, and she'd been considering it anyway since her father's death 6 months ago. By morning, Catherine Winters had answered a mail-order bride advertisement from Theodore Blackstone, a Wyoming rancher seeking a mature, practical woman for companionship and household management. The train west couldn't leave Boston fast enough. 3 weeks later, Catherine stood on the wooden platform of Clearwater Station, Wyoming territory, her traveling dress wilted from the long journey and her heart hammering with nervous anticipation. The mountain air was crisp and clean, so different from Boston's smoky atmosphere. She clutched Mr. Blackstone's letter, the one that had seemed so promising back in Massachusetts. The afternoon train hissed and clanked as passengers disembarked around her. Cowboys heading to distant ranches, a family with tired children, a traveling salesman with cases full of promises. But no sign of Theodore Blackstone. "Mrs. Winters." Catherine turned to see a tall, lean man approaching. His brown hair was streaked with early gray, and his eyes were the color of winter sky. He wore a station master's uniform and moved with quiet confidence. "I'm Marcus Harrington, station master here. Mr. Blackstone asked me to meet you." Catherine's stomach dropped. "Asked you to meet me? Where is Mr. Blackstone?" Marcus's expression grew uncomfortable. "I'm afraid there's been a change in plans. He asked me to give you this." He handed her an envelope. Catherine's hands trembled as she opened it, reading the hastily scrawled words that shattered her hopes once again. "Miss Winters, upon reflection, I've decided a woman of 38 is too advanced in years for my requirements. I've chosen a younger bride who arrived yesterday. I've arranged return passage to Boston on tomorrow's eastbound train. T. Blackstone." The words blurred as tears threatened. Too old at 38. Just like the piano student's parents in Boston had whispered, too old to be unmarried, too old to be useful, too old to matter. "I'm very sorry," Marcus said quietly. "Blackstone's a fool." Catherine folded the letter carefully, pride keeping her spine straight. "No, he's practical. I should have known better than to think." She stopped, unwilling to voice her humiliation to this stranger. "There's a boarding house in town, if you need a place to stay," Marcus offered. "Mrs. Patterson runs a clean establishment." Catherine looked at the small town spread below the station, then at the mountains rising beyond. Going back to Boston meant facing Morrison and his questions about those ledgers, if he hadn't already discovered her escape. But staying meant what? Being the pitied spinster in yet another place. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'll need to arrange passage back to Boston." "The eastbound doesn't come through until Thursday. That's 3 days. 3 days to figure out what to do. 3 days before she'd have to decide whether to face Morrison's justice or find another way to disappear entirely. Marcus hesitated, studying her face. If you don't mind my asking, why Wyoming? Why leave Boston for a complete stranger? The question was direct but not unkind. Catherine found herself wanting to answer honestly, though she couldn't tell him the whole truth. My father died 6 months ago. There was nothing left for me there. No family, no prospects. I thought perhaps, she gestured at the wide-open landscape. I thought perhaps there was still time to build something meaningful. There is, Marcus said firmly, just maybe not with Blackstone. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. He had kind eyes, she realized, though there was sadness in them. Lines around them spoke of laughter, but also of grief. You speak as if you know something about second chances, Catherine said. I do. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. Miss Winters, I'm going to say something that will sound completely insane. You have every right to refuse, but I'd like you to hear me out. Catherine's heart began to race. What is it? I have a proposition, a practical one. Marcus removed his hat, running his fingers through his hair. I'm 43 years old. My wife left 3 years ago, ran off with the traveling salesman. I have a 16-year-old daughter who needs a woman's guidance, and I need a partner to help run this station and the small ranch I'm building. He paused, meeting her eyes. I'm not offering romance, Miss Winters. I'm offering partnership. A marriage of convenience that would benefit us both. You'd have a home security purpose. I'd have help with Emma and someone who understands business. Catherine stared at him. You're proposing marriage to a complete stranger? Yes. Based on a 10-minute conversation? Yes. She searched for words. That's absolutely mad. Completely, Marcus agreed. But is it any madder than traveling 2,000 miles to marry Blackstone? The logic was inescapable. And as Catherine looked into Marcus's steady blue eyes, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate hope that had driven her to answer Blackstone's advertisement, but something more solid. This man was offering exactly what she needed: a place to belong, a way to be useful, and most importantly, a reason to stay far from Boston and Detective Morrison. What about your daughter? Catherine asked. Shouldn't she have a say in this? Marcus's expression grew complicated. Emma has trust issues when it comes to stepmothers. Her mother left without warning, you see, but she needs guidance I can't provide, and frankly, she could use an example of what a strong woman looks like. And you think I'm strong? You traveled halfway across a continent to start over at 38. That takes courage most people don't possess. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different. For the first time in months, someone saw her as capable rather than past her prime. I should meet your daughter before we make any decisions, she said carefully. Of course, but Catherine, he'd used her first name, she realized. I want you to know that if you accept this arrangement, I'll treat you with respect. You'll be my partner, not my housekeeper. And while I can't promise love, I can promise honesty and fairness. The train whistle blew its departure warning. Other passengers were climbing aboard, heading to other destinations, other dreams. Catherine watched them go and realized she was tired of running, tired of being unwanted, tired of having no place to call home. All right, she said quietly, let's meet your daughter. Marcus's face lit up with relief. Thank you for being willing to consider this. They walked from the station toward town, Catherine's bag in Marcus's capable hand. The autumn air was cool and clean, filled with the scent of pine and distant wood smoke, so different from Boston's cold-tinged atmosphere. Tell me about the station work, Catherine said. I assume there's more to it than meeting trains. Telegraph operations, freight coordination, passenger assistance, scheduling. It's the communication hub for this entire region. Marcus glanced at her. Do you have experience with business operations? I was a bookkeeper in Boston for Fairfield Shipping. I managed accounts payroll correspondence. Catherine hesitated, then added carefully, I left because there were irregularities I couldn't overlook. It was true enough, though, she couldn't explain that those irregularities had led to murder. Integrity, Marcus said approvingly. That's rare in business. They reached a small house behind the station, painted white with green trim, and a front porch lined with flower boxes. Even in October, someone had maintained the garden with care. "Your wife did the gardening?" Catherine asked. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Emma does. She says plants don't lie or leave." Before Catherine could respond, the front door opened and a young woman stepped out. Emma Harrington was tall for 16, with her father's dark hair and blue eyes. But where Marcus's face showed kindness, Emma's was guarded. She wore a simple blue dress and an expression of deep suspicion. "This is her," Emma asked without preamble. "The one Blackstone threw away." "Emma," Marcus said sharply. "It's all right," Catherine said, studying the girl. She saw intelligence in those wary eyes and pain carefully hidden behind defiance. "Yes, I'm the one Mr. Blackstone found unsuitable. Apparently, I'm too old for his purposes." "Good," Emma said bluntly. "At least you're honest about it. Most women who come through here pretend to be something they're not." "And what am I pretending to be?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "Someone who will stay." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Catherine felt a strange kinship with this angry young woman who'd clearly been disappointed before. "You're right to be suspicious," Catherine said. "I'm a stranger, and strangers can disappoint you. But I'm not here to pretend anything. Your father has offered me a practical arrangement, a partnership, not a fairy tale. If I accept, it will be because I believe we can build something useful together. All three of us. And if you don't like it, if you get bored or lonely or meet someone more interesting," Catherine met Emma's stare directly. "Then I'll discuss it honestly rather than disappear in the night. You deserve better than that." Something flickered in Emma's expression, surprise perhaps, or the faintest hint of hope. Marcus was watching both women carefully as if their interaction would determine his future. "Can you cook?" Emma asked after a moment. "Adequately. Can you better than Pa?" Emma almost smiled. "Can you handle books and numbers?" "Yes. Can you read and write well?" "Of course I can read," Emma said indignantly. "Good. Then we'll understand each other." Catherine looked between father and daughter. "I should be clear about something. I don't intend to replace anyone or change how you've been managing. I'm offering to add to what you've built, not tear it down." Marcus stepped forward. "Catherine, would you like to see the station operations, Emma? Perhaps you could show her the house." It was clearly a test. Emma studied Catherine for a long moment, then shrugged. "Fine, but don't touch my mother's things." "I wouldn't dream of it." They spent the next hour walking through the small house. Emma showed Catherine each room with careful pride, the kitchen with its efficient layout, the parlor with Marcus's books and Emma's needlework, the upstairs bedrooms with their simple furnishings. In the master bedroom, Catherine noticed a woman's dressing table still held brushes and perfume bottles. "She left everything," Emma said quietly, noticing Catherine's glance. "Just took her jewelry and ran." "I'm sorry," Catherine said. "That must have been very painful. Pa was hurt worse than me. He really loved her." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but Catherine caught the underlying hurt. "She said ranch life was too hard, too lonely. Said she needed excitement." "Some people aren't built for quiet contentment," Catherine said carefully. "That doesn't mean quiet contentment isn't valuable." Emma shot her a sharp look. "You think you're built for it?" "I hope so. I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime." They returned downstairs to find Marcus at the kitchen table with papers spread before him. Station logs, Catherine realized, in what looked like ranch accounts. "The books," he explained, looking up. "I've been managing everything myself since I've been alone. It's getting unwieldy." Catherine moved closer, studying the neat columns of figures. Even at a glance, she could see places where systems could be improved, where efficiency could be increased. "You're doing well," she said honestly. "But yes, I can see where another set of hands would help. The freight coordination alone must take hours each week. You understand this work. I manage similar operations in Boston, just on a larger scale." Catherine paused, that made her decision. "Marcus, I'd like to accept your proposal." Emma's eyes widened. Marcus set down his pen, studying Catherine's face. "You're certain, as certain as anyone can be about something this unprecedented." Catherine smiled slightly. "But yes, I think we could build something good together. All three of us." Marcus stood, extending his hand formally. "Then let's make this official. There's a justice of the peace in town, but if you'd prefer a church ceremony." "Simple and practical suits me." Catherine said, shaking his hand. When? Tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. Emma's voice cracked slightly. You're really doing this. You're really marrying a complete stranger. Marcus moved to his daughter, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. Emma, I know this seems sudden, but Catherine isn't a stranger anymore. She's going to be family. And I think your mother would approve of her. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. You don't know what Ma would think. She's been gone for 3 years. I know she'd want you to have someone who will stay, Marcus said gently. Someone who will see how remarkable you are and help you become everything you can be. Catherine watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about Marcus needing help with the station or ranch. This was about a father desperately wanting to give his daughter the stability and feminine guidance she'd been denied. Emma, Catherine said quietly, I want you to know something. I've never been married before, never had children. I don't know how to be a stepmother, but I do know how to be a friend, a teacher, and someone who keeps her promises. That's what I'm offering, not to replace anyone, but to be here consistently for as long as you'll have me. Emma stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, she said, but if you hurt my father, I'll make your life very difficult. Catherine almost smiled at the fierce protectiveness in the girl's voice. I'd expect nothing less. That evening, Catherine sat on the small porch behind the house, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Tomorrow she would marry a man she'd known for less than 12 hours. It was impulsive, dangerous, and completely unlike anything she'd ever done. It was also, she realized, exactly what she needed. Marcus joined her on the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee. Second thoughts. Third and fourth thoughts, Catherine admitted, but not regrets. Good. Marcus settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I want you to know, Catherine, that regardless of what happens between us personally, you'll always have a home here. This arrangement isn't contingent on developing feelings. Catherine appreciated his directness. Thank you. That's good to know. She paused. Can I ask what happened with your wife? You don't have to answer if it's too personal. Marcus was quiet for so long, Catherine thought he wouldn't respond. Then he said, Margaret was 19 when we married. Beautiful, lively, full of dreams about ranch life. But reality was harder than she'd imagined. The isolation, the work, the responsibility of helping run the station. When Emma was born, things got better for a while. But as Emma grew older and needed less constant attention, Margaret grew restless again. He took a sip of coffee. The traveling salesman was just the excuse. She'd been planning to leave for months. She told me ranch life was killing her spirit, that she needed to see the world experience life. She took our savings and Emma's college fund. I'm sorry, Catherine said softly. That must have been devastating. For Emma more than me, Marcus said. I'd begun to realize Margaret and I wanted different things. But Emma, she thought it was her fault somehow. That if she'd been a better daughter, more interesting, less trouble, Margaret would have stayed. Catherine's heart ached for the young woman inside, probably listening to every word. Children always blame themselves. Yes, and I haven't done a good job of convincing her otherwise. Marcus looked at Catherine. That's one reason I'm grateful you're here. Emma needs to see that not all women run when life gets difficult. I've already done my running, Catherine said quietly. I have nowhere else to go. It was more truth than she'd intended to share, but Marcus seemed to understand. Sometimes having nowhere else to go is exactly what makes us ready to build something lasting, he said. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the mountains. In the distance, Catherine could hear the lonely whistle of a freight train. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Marcus Harrington. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, peace. Inside the house, Emma watched from her bedroom window as her father and his bride-to-be sat together in the gathering darkness. They weren't touching, weren't even sitting particularly close, but there was something in their posture that suggested they were comfortable together. Maybe Emma thought this wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. The wedding ceremony took place the next morning in Justice Webb's small office above the general store. Catherine wore her best traveling dress, dark blue wool, with mother-of-pearl buttons, while Marcus had donned his Sunday suit. Emma stood as witness, her expression carefully neutral. Do you, Marcus William Harrington, take Catherine Rose Winters to be your lawfully wedded wife? to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live. I do. Do you, Catherine Rose Winters, take Marcus William Harrington to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Catherine looked into Marcus's steady blue eyes. I do. By the power vested in me by Wyoming territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Justice Webb closed his book with a satisfied snap. That'll be $2 for the ceremony and 50 cents for filing the certificate. Marcus paid the fee while Catherine signed the marriage register with slightly shaking hands. Mrs. Catherine Harrington. After 38 years, she finally had a husband's name. Congratulations, Webb said cheerfully. You planning a celebration? Nothing elaborate, Marcus replied, but perhaps dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was Emma who surprised them. Actually, she said quietly, I prepared something at home, if you'd prefer. Catherine felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was Emma's way of accepting the marriage, she realized, of making it a family celebration rather than just a legal transaction. That sounds perfect, Catherine said. Thank you, Emma. They walked back to the house together, Catherine's new wedding ring catching the morning sunlight. It was a simple gold band Marcus had purchased from the general store that morning, practical rather than romantic, but it felt solid and real on her finger. The meal Emma had prepared was impressive roast chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh biscuits. Catherine was touched by the obvious effort that had gone into the preparation. This is delicious, Emma, she said. Where did you learn to cook so well? Mrs. Patterson taught me after Ma left, Emma said. Pa was hopeless in the kitchen. I'm still hopeless, Marcus added with a smile. I can make coffee and fry eggs. That's about the limit of my culinary skills. Well, between the three of us, I think we'll manage, Catherine said. I can handle basic meals, and Emma clearly has the more advanced techniques mastered. After dinner, Marcus returned to the station for the afternoon train, while Catherine and Emma tackled the dishes together. They worked in companionable silence at first, but gradually began to talk. Can I ask you something? Emma said as she dried a plate. Of course, eh? Why did you really leave Boston? The real reason, I mean. Catherine's hands stilled in the soapy water. She'd known this question would come, but she still wasn't sure how much truth she could share. There was trouble at my workplace, she said carefully. I discovered some irregularities in the company's books. When I tried to report it, I found myself in a difficult position. What kind of irregularities? Catherine admired Emma's directness. Money being moved around inappropriately. Bribes, I think. When I tried to do the right thing, I discovered the corruption went deeper than I'd realized. It was true enough, though, she couldn't explain about Morrison or the murder. So you ran away? The blunt question stung, but Catherine answered honestly. Yes, I ran away. Sometimes running away is the smart thing to do. Emma considered this. Ma ran away too, but she wasn't running from danger, she was running from us. Catherine set down the plate she'd been washing and turned to face Emma fully. There's a difference between running from something harmful and running from responsibility. You understand that, don't you? I think so. Emma's voice was small. But how do I know you won't decide we're too much trouble and run too? Catherine's heart ached for this young woman who'd been abandoned by the one person who should have loved her unconditionally. You don't know, she said honestly. I can make promises, but words are easy. You'll have to judge me by my actions. And if I'm difficult, if I test you and make things hard, then I'll deal with it. Emma, I'm not some young woman with romantic notions about family life. I'm 38 years old. I know life is difficult and people are complicated. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for purpose. That afternoon, Catherine began learning the intricacies of station management. The telegraph key was familiar. She'd learned Morse code years ago, but coordinating train schedules, freight manifests, and passenger transfers required a different kind of organizational skill. The afternoon eastbound brings mail and sometimes passengers for the spur lines, Marcus explained, showing her the routing charts. We have to sort everything for the local delivery service and the ranch connections. Catherine studied the charts, already seeing ways to streamline the process. What about freight shipments? Do you handle cargo transfers? Some, mostly cattle shipments and mining equipment headed for the silver claims up north. Marcus glanced at her. Are you already planning improvements? Maybe. Catherine smiled. I have some ideas about better record-keeping systems. I'd like to hear them. They were interrupted by the afternoon train's arrival. Catherine watched Marcus work, noting his efficiency and the respect he clearly commanded from the crew. This wasn't just a job for him. He took pride in keeping the transportation networks running smoothly. A passenger disembarked from the eastbound train, and Catherine felt her blood turn to ice. The man was tall, well-dressed, with graying hair and cold eyes that she remembered too well from that night in Boston. Detective Morrison. Catherine ducked behind the freight counter, her heart pounding. How had he found her so quickly? She'd been so careful, using only cash, leaving no forwarding address. Catherine, Marcus appeared beside her. What's wrong? You look pale. I, I need to go to the house, she managed. I'm not feeling well. Marcus frowned with concern. Of course. Do you need me to walk with you? No, I'll be fine. Catherine forced herself to move normally, not to run. Through the window, she could see Morrison speaking with the station agent, showing him something, probably a photograph. She reached the house with her knees shaking and immediately went to the bedroom she now shared with Marcus. Her few belongings were still in her traveling bag. If she had to run again. Mrs. Harrington. Emma appeared in the doorway. Pa said you were feeling poorly. Catherine realized she was sitting on the bed staring at her packed bag. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell your father. If anyone comes asking about me about Catherine Winters, you don't know anyone by that name. Can you do that? Emma's eyes widened. You are running from something. Yes, and I'm sorry because this isn't fair to you or your father, but what kind of trouble are you in? Catherine looked at this girl who'd already been abandoned once. She deserved some version of the truth. I witnessed something terrible in Boston. A crime. The person who committed it is looking for me, and if he finds me, Catherine's voice trailed off. He'll hurt you. Very likely. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, to Catherine's amazement, she moved to the window and peered out carefully. Is it the man who just got off the train, tall, fancy suit, mean eyes? You saw him. I was coming back from the general store. He was asking Mr. Peters about new arrivals, women traveling alone. Emma turned from the window. He's not a very good detective if he thinks Mr. Peters keeps track of anything properly. Catherine stared at her. You're not afraid? Of course I'm afraid, but you're family now. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. Family protects each other. Besides, she added with a slight smile, life was getting boring around here. 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through the front door. Catherine, there's a detective from Boston asking questions about you. Catherine stood up slowly. I know. I saw him. He says you're wanted for questioning in connection with a murder. That's true. Marcus stopped short. Catherine, I didn't kill anyone, Marcus, but I witnessed a murder, and the man who committed it is the same man who's tracking me now. Catherine told them everything then about the corruption she'd discovered, about seeing Morrison kill Chief Bradley, about fleeing west to escape his reach. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing darker by the minute. Morrison killed a police chief, he asked when she finished. The only honest cop who would listen to me about the shipping company's books. Catherine's hands were shaking. Marcus, I understand if you want to annul the marriage. I never meant to bring this kind of trouble into your life. Annul the marriage. Marcus stared at her incredulously. Catherine, you're my wife. We'll face this together. But the danger is exactly why you need protection. Marcus began pacing. Morrison has no legal authority here. Wyoming territory doesn't recognize Boston police jurisdiction without proper paperwork from the territorial governor. He'll have paperwork eventually. Eventually isn't today. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her intently. Catherine, do you still have copies of those ledgers? I memorized the key figures, but the actual papers. Catherine stopped. Actually, yes. I sewed them into the lining of my traveling coat. I was afraid to leave them anywhere they might be discovered. Good, that gives us leverage. Marcus sat down beside her. Here's what we're going to do. Emma, I need you to go to town and tell Sheriff Conway that a man claiming to be a Boston detective is asking questions without showing proper credentials. Will that stop him? Catherine asked. It'll slow him down, and it establishes that he's operating outside legal channels. Marcus took her hands. Catherine, I meant what I said about partnership. I won't let Morrison hurt you. That evening, they received word that Morrison had taken a room at the hotel and was claiming to be investigating a fugitive from justice. Sheriff Conway had asked to see his paperwork and been told it was in transit. He's stalling, Marcus said over dinner, which means he doesn't have official sanction for this pursuit. Or he's waiting for backup, Catherine said quietly. Either way, we have time to plan. Marcus looked between Catherine and Emma. I think we should take a trip. A trip, Emma looked puzzled. To visit my brother's ranch up near Sheridan. It's a 3-day ride and he's got enough hands to provide security if needed. Marcus paused. Unless anyone asked, we're just taking a delayed honeymoon. Catherine felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. You'd do that? Risk your business, your safety? Catherine, you're a part of this family now. We protect our own. They spent the next hour planning their departure. Emma would pack supplies while Marcus arranged for the station to be covered by his assistant. Catherine would retrieve the ledger copies from her coat lining. As they prepared for bed that night, Marcus taking the floor while Catherine took the bed, both maintaining the respectful distance they'd agreed upon, Catherine realized something had fundamentally changed. This was no longer just a marriage of convenience. Somewhere between Morrison's arrival and Emma's fierce loyalty, they'd become a real family. Marcus, she said softly in the darkness. Yes. Thank you for believing me, for protecting me. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell the truth. Outside, a wind was rising, rustling the trees around the house. Catherine pulled the blankets closer and tried not to think about Morrison sleeping just a few miles away, planning his next move. Tomorrow they would leave for Sheridan, but eventually they would have to return. Eventually, this would have to be resolved. But tonight she wasn't alone. Tonight she had a husband who was willing to fight for her and a stepdaughter who'd claimed her as family. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In her narrow bed, Emma lay awake, thinking about the woman who'd become her stepmother less than 24 hours ago. Catherine hadn't lied or made false promises. She hadn't tried to be anything other than exactly what she was, a woman in trouble who needed help just like Emma and her father had needed help after Ma left. Maybe that was what family really meant. Not people who were perfect, but people who were honest about their imperfections and stayed anyway. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Marcus was up before sunrise preparing the wagon and horses for the journey to Sheridan. Catherine packed quickly, including the ledger copies she'd carefully removed from her coat. Emma filled a basket with food for the road. As they loaded the wagon, Catherine noticed a figure watching them from the hotel balcony. Morrison taking note of their departure. He couldn't follow them immediately. He had no horse, no supplies for a journey, but he would find a way. He's watching, she told Marcus quietly. Good. Let him think we're just a family taking a trip. Marcus helped her into the wagon seat. Once we're at my brother's place, we'll decide our next move. They rolled out of Clearwater just as the sun topped the eastern mountains, heading north toward an uncertain future. But as Catherine watched the familiar buildings disappear behind them, she realized she felt something she'd never experienced before, the certainty that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The journey to Sheridan took them through some of the most beautiful country Catherine had ever seen. Rolling hills gave way to dramatic canyons, and everywhere the autumn colors painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Despite the reason for their journey, Catherine found herself falling in love with Wyoming's raw beauty. It's magnificent, she said to Marcus as they paused to rest the horses beside a clear mountain stream. Wait until spring, Emma said, joining them at the water's edge. When the wildflowers bloom, it looks like God spilled paint across the meadows. Catherine smiled at the poetic description. There were depths to Emma she was only beginning to discover. They reached the Harrington Ranch late on the second day. Marcus's brother James was 10 years older, with silver-streaked hair and the weathered face of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. His wife Sarah welcomed them warmly, though Catherine could see the questions in her eyes. Over dinner, Marcus explained the situation. James listened without comment until the story was finished, then leaned back in his chair. So you're telling me there's a corrupt Boston detective tracking my new sister-in-law for witnessing a murder? That's the situation, Marcus confirmed. James grinned suddenly. Well, that's the most excitement we've had around here in years. He looked at Catherine. Don't worry, ma'am. We've dealt with worse than one crooked cop. He might not be alone, Catherine warned, and he's dangerous. So are we, Sarah said matter-of-factly. James, show her the rifle collection. The next morning, Catherine was surprised to be awakened by gunshots. She rushed to the window to see Emma and Sarah practicing target shooting while James called out corrections to their form. Morning, Marcus said, appearing beside her with a cup of coffee. Sarah insisted Emma should know how to defend herself properly. Can she shoot? Better than I can, actually. Margaret taught her before she left. Marcus's expression darkened slightly at the mention of his first wife. Catherine watched Emma handle the rifle with confident competence. She's remarkable, you know. Strong, intelligent, capable. You should be very proud. I am, but I worry I haven't given her enough feminine guidance. She's had to grow up too fast, be too independent. Independence isn't a flaw, Marcus. It's what will keep her safe in this world. Catherine turned to face him. Besides, she has plenty of feminine qualities. She's nurturing, insightful, fiercely loyal. Those aren't masculine traits, they're human ones. That afternoon, as Catherine helped Sarah with the washing, she noticed a dust cloud on the southern horizon. James, who'd been watching with field glasses, lowered them with a grim expression. 3 riders heading this way. One matches the description of your Boston detective. Catherine's blood chilled. He found us. Apparently, James was already moving toward the house. Sarah, get the rifles. Marcus, bring Catherine inside. Emma, you stay with the women. But Emma had other ideas. I'm not hiding while my family's in danger. Emma, Marcus started. No, Pa. We're all in this together. Catherine felt a surge of pride at the girl's courage, even as fear knotted her stomach. Morrison had found them despite their precautions, and he'd brought help. The 3 men rode into the ranch yard with the confidence of people who expected to be obeyed. Morrison dismounted, first adjusting his coat to make his gun visible. I'm Detective Morrison, Boston Police. I'm here for Catherine Winters. James stepped onto the porch, his own rifle visible in his hands. This is private property. You have no authority here. I have a warrant for Miss Winters' arrest in connection with murder. Let's see it, Marcus said, emerging from the house. Catherine and the women remained inside, but she could hear every word through the open window. Morrison hesitated. The paperwork is being processed through territorial authorities. So you have no warrant, James said flatly. No jurisdiction, no legal standing. You're trespassing. That woman is a fugitive from justice. That woman is my brother's wife, and she's under our protection. James's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I suggest you leave, now. Morrison's companions shifted nervously. They were clearly hired guns, not lawmen, and the situation wasn't developing as they'd expected. This doesn't end here, Morrison said finally. I'll have proper paperwork within the week. Then come back when you have it, Marcus said. Until then, stay away from my family. The 3 men remounted and rode off, but Catherine knew this was far from over. Morrison would be back, probably with more men and better planning. We can't stay here, she told Marcus that evening. I won't put your brother's family at risk. You're not going anywhere, Sarah said firmly. Morrison made this our fight the moment he rode onto our land with threats. Sarah's right, James added. Besides, running won't solve this. Morrison will just keep following you. Then what do we do? Marcus looked thoughtful. We go on the offensive. Catherine, you said you memorized the key financial data from those ledgers. Yes, the major discrepancies in the account numbers involved. Then we telegraph that information to the territorial governor and the federal marshal service. We make Morrison's corruptions public before he can silence you. It was a dangerous gamble, but Catherine realized it might be their only chance. The next morning, Marcus rode to Sheridan to send the telegrams, while Catherine worked on writing down everything she could remember about Morrison's criminal activities. Emma helped, asking sharp questions that helped Catherine recall additional details. What about the shipping schedules? Did the money movements correspond to specific cargo arrivals? Yes, Catherine said, suddenly remembering. The bribes always came through just before ships arrived from certain European ports. There was a pattern. Smuggling, Emma said immediately. That's why Morrison killed the police chief. He was getting close to exposing an entire smuggling ring. Catherine stared at her stepdaughter with new respect. You're absolutely right. This is much bigger than just bribes. When Marcus returned that afternoon, he brought news. I've sent detailed reports to both the territorial governor and the federal marshal in Cheyenne. If what you've described is accurate, they'll want to investigate immediately. And if Morrison comes back before help arrives, then we're ready for him, James said wearily. They didn't have to wait long. Morrison returned 2 days later, this time with 6 men and a very official-looking document. Territorial warrant for the arrest of Catherine Winters, also known as Catherine Harrington, he announced from horseback. Anyone interfering with this arrest will be charged with obstruction of justice. Catherine stepped onto the porch flanked by Marcus and Emma. She was terrified, but she wasn't going to hide anymore. "Let me see that warrant," she called out. Morrison urged his horse closer, holding out the paper. As Catherine reached for it, she noticed something that made her heart race. The signature was smudged, the seal unclear. "This is a forgery," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The territorial seal is wrong, and this signature doesn't match Governor Warren's hand." Morrison's face darkened. "You're in no position to question legal documents." "Actually, she is," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see a group of riders approaching from the east. Federal marshals, their badges gleaming in the afternoon sun. The lead rider dismounted and walked toward Morrison. "Detective Morrison, I'm U.S. Marshal Roberts. You're under arrest for murder, corruption, and falsifying federal documents." What followed was swift and efficient. Morrison's hired guns, faced with federal marshals, surrendered without a fight. Morrison himself tried to reach for his weapon, but found himself staring down the barrels of half a dozen rifles. "Mrs. Harrington," Marshal Roberts said to Catherine, "we'll need you to testify about what you witnessed in Boston. But I want you to know your information has already led to arrests throughout the Boston Police Department. The smuggling ring you helped expose was bigger than anyone imagined." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. "It's really over. As far as Morrison goes, yes, ma'am, you're free to go home." That evening, as they celebrated Morrison's arrest, Catherine found herself alone on the porch with Emma. The girl had been quiet since the marshals left, and Catherine sensed something was troubling her. "What's on your mind?" Catherine asked. "Are you going to leave now?" Emma's voice was carefully controlled. "Now that the danger's over, I mean, you don't have to stay married to Pa for protection anymore." Catherine turned to study Emma's profile in the fading light. "Is that what you think, that I only married your father to escape Morrison?" "Didn't you?" Catherine considered her words carefully. "Initially, yes. Marriage to your father offered me safety when I desperately needed it. But Emma, somewhere along the way, something changed." "What changed?" "I stopped running and started building. I stopped thinking about what I was escaping from and started thinking about what I was creating." Catherine paused. "Your father is a good man. You're an exceptional young woman. And this place, this life, it's become home in ways I never expected." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, "So you're staying, really staying? If you'll have me, if your father will have me?" Catherine smiled. "I know this all happened quickly, unconventionally. But Emma, I love you both. Not the desperate love of someone with no other options, but the deep, committed love of someone who's found exactly where she belongs." Emma's face crumpled suddenly, and she threw her arms around Catherine. "I was so scared you'd leave," she whispered. "I was so scared I'd lose another mother." Catherine held her tight, her own tears flowing freely. "Never," she whispered back. "You're stuck with me now, sweetheart, for as long as you want me." They were still embracing when Marcus found them. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with obvious emotion. "Everything all right out here?" he asked softly. "Everything's perfect," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "I was just making sure Catherine knows she's stuck with us." Marcus moved to sit beside Catherine on the porch swing. "Are we stuck with you, I mean?" Catherine looked between her husband and stepdaughter, these people who'd become her family in the space of a week. "I'm afraid so, if that's what you want." "It's what we want," Marcus said firmly. "Catherine, I know our marriage began as a practical arrangement, but, Catherine prompted, "but I find myself hoping it becomes something more." Catherine felt her heart race. "What kind of something more?" Marcus took her hand. "The kind where we're married because we choose each other, not because circumstances forced us together. The kind where we build a real partnership, a real family, a real future." "I'd like that," Catherine said softly. "I'd like that very much." 6 months later, Catherine stood in the same spot on the Clearwater Station platform where she'd first met Marcus. They'd returned for a very specific purpose. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, adjusting his tie nervously. "Completely sure," Catherine replied, smoothing her new blue dress. "We got married the first time out of necessity. This time we're choosing each other." Emma stood beside them, beaming with pride. She wore a new dress, too, and in her hands was a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked that morning. "Dearly beloved," Justice Webb began, "we are gathered here today to witness the renewal of vows between Marcus and Catherine Harrington." This time when they spoke their vows, every word was chosen, deliberately spoken with full knowledge of what marriage meant. When Marcus kissed his bride, Catherine felt the difference. This wasn't the tentative kiss of strangers making a desperate bargain. This was the kiss of partners who'd chosen to build a life together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Harrington again." The small crowd of townspeople applauded. Catherine looked out at the faces of people who'd become friends and neighbors, then at Emma, who was crying happy tears, then at Marcus, who was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. A year ago, she'd been a lonely spinster in Boston with no prospects and no family. Today, she was a wife, a mother, a partner in a growing business, and a valued member of her community. The transformation still amazed her. "No regrets," Marcus whispered as they walked back toward their home. Catherine thought about Morrison safely imprisoned, about the ledgers that had helped expose an entire criminal network, about the terrified woman who'd fled Boston with nothing but a carpet bag and desperate hope. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." That evening, as they celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant, Emma raised her glass of lemonade in a toast. "To second chances," she said solemnly, "and to families that choose each other." Catherine and Marcus raised their glasses to meet hers. "To second chances," they echoed. And as the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Catherine Harrington knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Sometimes the most impulsive decisions turned out to be the wisest ones. Sometimes a desperate leap of faith landed you exactly where you needed to be. Sometimes, if you were very lucky, love found you on a train platform in the middle of nowhere and offered you everything you'd never dared to dream of.